There has to be a vision of what comes next. And in our view, it has to be a two-state solution.
Let's bring in Mike Hanna in Washington, D.C. Mike, tell us more about what Biden had to say.
Well, there, referring himself to a two-state solution, he also spoke very strongly about settler violence in the West Bank, saying that this was unacceptable, it was pouring fuel on the fires. Hundreds have been displaced in settlement violence in the West Bank, many driven out to other homes. This has been ongoing since the Hamas attack on October the 7th. President Biden also saying, though, that he had not in any way spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu about the timing of an invasion or any probable invasion of Gaza. He implied that that is something that would be up to Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli Security Cabinet. He expressed the opinion that such an invasion should not take place until the hostages are released, but continued to stress that this is a decision that should be taken by the Israeli government. So President Biden once again threading the needle here, attempting not to publicly criticize the Israeli government, at the same time making very clear a public call for a return to a two-state solution, and also condemning that kind of settler violence that's been observed in the...
Around 60 trucks containing food have been allowed into Gaza over the last few days.
In recent days, he was making this effort to...
Yeah, well, that's what they said, 20 trucks a day. And there's a lot more than that have gone through, because a lot of the trucks actually had 2 wagons on them. So they were double. So that's 2 wagons, both 40 foot each. That's 80 foot of cargo. That's a lot of food.
Asking him to tone down the coverage of Al Jazeera. It appears that this references our sister service, Al Jazeera Arabic, but this has not been independently confirmed. I must stress as well that from my own position, I've had no pressure of any kind whatsoever from members of the Biden administration, very much the opposite. In fact, most of the time I've received words of encouragement about our network's coverage, perhaps not in the last few weeks in the current...
Oh, apparently Al Jazeera are having their asses kicked. Someone is saying they've got to quieten it down because they sound like a mouthpiece for Hamas.
This is something that I've associated with Al Jazeera since I've been with them, which is a long period of time indeed.
Indeed. All right, Mike, thanks for that. Mike Hanna reporting there. Thank you. Well, European leaders are set to meet in Brussels to discuss the situation in Gaza. Let's hear now from Steph Fasten.
Massive. It's just been a massive strike in Gaza. That's Israel's response to a ceasefire. In other words, go play with your monkey, because we're going in and we're going to go in hard. They've killed an Al Jazeera reporter's family, allegedly in a refugee camp. They struck the house that they were in. They're in a refugee camp and they're in a house.
But even on that issue, the 27 leaders can't agree, let alone talking about a condemnation or asking for a ceasefire. So what happened is...
I don't know, you'd have to see. Hey, whoever's just come in the room.
The president of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, said that Israel has every right to defend itself, full stop. There was no more addition to that. Basically, a carte blanche. And what happened is that there was a lot of response, angry response from people within Europe, from within the member states, from within their own governments that really were complaining about that wording.
Well, shit's happening in Gaza tonight.
We need to look at
big shit. Hold on, let me put the TV on. Hold on. There you go. Big strikes tonight. This on the other channel. Only mine, because I get it live from Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera, they're in charge of Gaza, so they get it all. This is live from Gaza. This is Al Jazeera live from Gaza.
If you're in Al Jazeera, stay with us.
Right, anyway, I'm going to have a cup of coffee while the break's on. Whoa! Freeze! I've just tripped over the... Whoops, you don't really want to see my ass. What was I going to say? Yeah, I just tripped over the power cord. Daddy.
But it will bring very heavy rain, flooding rains, and potential for damaging winds coming into New Caledonia as it continues to sink its way southwards. Heavy showers, longer spells of rain. They're still affecting the eastern side of Australia as well, just around the Sunshine Coast, right through Brisbane, right down towards Sydney. Some wetter weather coming in here. And that cloud and rain extends its way across to New Zealand, where it will turn increasingly blustery as we go through the next couple of days. It sweeps through. Dry weather tries to come back in behind here. On the cool side, it freshens up somewhat. We have got slightly fresher weather around that eastern side of Oz as well, but signs of some warmer weather just coming into the southeast, moving further eastwards as we go on through Saturday. Brighter skies in Brisbane at around 24 Celsius. Bright skies lifting temperatures in Perth to around 24 degrees Celsius as well. It's largely dry and bright too across central and northern parts of China at present. Warmth all the way up towards Ulaanbaatar. Temperatures 7 or 8 above average. Bright skies too, 24 Celsius there for Tokyo, but wetter weather moving in for Friday.
The weather, brought to you by Visit Qatar.
Amidst the world slowdown, we stand firm as home to a fifth of global nickel reserves. Indonesia is poised to lead the global EV battery industry. We adeptly manage our abundant resources and play a vital role in solar energy harnessing, offering 75% of global carbon credit potential, committed to environmental protection, enhancing investment climate through digital licensing. Indonesia, your better tomorrow.
Hello again. Let's remind you of our top story. The wife, son, and daughter of Al Jazeera correspondent Wael Dadu has been killed in an Israeli airstrike in central Gaza. His grandson was also killed. The Dadu family used to live in Gaza City, but when the Israeli army issued an evacuation order, Wael sent them to the Al Nusret camp, refugee camp, for their safety. He remained behind to report on the situation in northern Gaza. Wael was reporting from Gaza City, in fact, on Wednesday evening, when he was told that they had been hit. Wael's son Mahmoud was in his final year of high school, and his daughter Sham was just 7 years old. Let's hear now from Al Jazeera's Gaza producer Safwat Khalud, who joins us now on the phone from Gaza. And you know Wael very well, and I think something that really bears repeating is the fact that Wael moved his family from the north to the supposedly designated safe area in the south, and they've been bombed and been killed.
Little children have got new toys. Little children have got new toys, so they want to go power crazy. Like big bees. Oh, I've got a new toy. I can block people. I can throw people out the roof. Well, you can actually.
Including while he will not be able to do proper funeral for his.
Yeah, they're saying this guy family was targeted. Well, first of all, how the hell would Israel know his family was in the refugee camp? And how would they know what house? Bull.
Bombardment everywhere. It's unclear how and where the family or Wael's family will be buried tomorrow. But at least we know that it will be
I don't need to read this anymore.
One of them where lots of people have been getting big hole and buried in certain place.
Really is a tragic situation. Safwat, we'll leave it there for the moment. Safwat Khalud, Al Jazeera's Gaza producer. Thank you. Of course, this is the family of a journalist which has been killed, but additionally, at least 23 journalists have been killed themselves since the start of the conflict. Sharif Mansour is the Committee to Protect Journalists Middle East and North Africa Programme Coordinator. He's in Washington, D.C. and says that the situation for journalists in Gaza is just the worst he's seen.
This is the deadliest time we have on record for journalists dying, doing their work anywhere else since we started counting. We have not seen that many people in 2 weeks, period. Over the course of more than 20 years, we documented 20 journalists overall, mostly Palestinian, 18 of them dying covering this conflict past war in the Gaza war. 13 of them were in Gaza, but we've already seen close to double that just in the last 2 weeks. And comparatively in Ukraine, we counted since the start of the war around 15 killed so far. So even at the highest of the Syria civil war, over a course of a year, we saw 30 journalists killed. So no in recent memory that toll we've seen among journalists.
Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, say they have renewed attacks on Tel Aviv in Israel. Posting on Telegram, the group said it was in response to Israel's attacks against civilians. Footage emerged online on Wednesday evening, appearing to show the streets of Tel Aviv filled with dust and several buildings damaged. Let's bring in Charles Stratford, who joins us now from Ramallah, is monitoring the situation. Charlie, tell us more about those rockets in Tel Aviv.
That's right, Nick. Yes, we've been looking at those videos too. Certainly at least one building seemingly hit by one of those rockets. This is an area, if you like, in greater Tel Aviv. It's not in the center of the city, but it's an indication yet again that Hamas still has the capability, or Palestinian fighters, at least in Gaza, have the capability to strike deep within Israel. So far, according to the Israeli media, numbers of injured vary between 4 and 18. And yes, you're right, this follows this statement by the Qassam brigades, Hamas's military wing, that this is in response to what they describe as being a massacre of civilians inside Gaza. Interestingly also, earlier in the day, there was an intercepted rocket considerably north of Tel Aviv, around about 100 kilometers north of Tel Aviv, Tiberias. Now, we've seen rockets launched and reaching that far in the last few days. All of them have been intercepted, but it is an example, yet again, of seemingly Hamas's ability to strike deep inside Israel. They've also, earlier this afternoon, announced that they launched a missile south towards Eilat. Obviously, Eilat is a huge tourist town on the Red Sea. Hamas is saying that it was one of their rockets called an Ayash 250. It's a weapon that Hamas are very proud of. They say that the Israelis have great difficulty in intercepting this particular rocket, but we understand that that indeed was intercepted too. So yeah, an indication that Hamas still have a capability to be able to hit deep inside Israel, but the majority of these rockets are still being intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense system.
And all the while, Charlie, Israeli forces have ramped up raids in the occupied West Bank in recent days. Tension is very high. What's the latest?
Well, that's right. Yeah, we go into another night here on the occupied West Bank where it's fully expected we will be seeing more raids by the Israeli military in their campaign to arrest suspected members of Hamas and Palestinian gunmen here in the occupied West Bank. Thus far, 1,350 arrests since those initial Hamas attacks on October the 7th. 104 Palestinians killed, including children and one woman, and that includes 2 Palestinians that have died in custody. Interestingly, today, the top Israeli commander here in the occupied West Bank, a Brigadier General Avi Bluth, he was meeting with settler leaders on the West Bank, and he said that we've taken the gloves off in our war with Hamas in Judea and Samaria. That's what Israel calls the occupied West Bank. And he said, He said that we're going to see more offensive operations to cleanse, in his words, terrorist nests like we saw in Noura Shams. Now, Noura Shams is a refugee camp north of here that was hit particularly hard in a raid a few days ago. 14 people were killed in that raid, including 2 children aged 10. There were a number of arrests, around 10 people arrested there. But the devastation, the level of destruction in that refugee camp in Noura Shams was really quite shocking. So, yeah, an indication that this campaign by the Israeli military to come into the occupied West Bank in these raids, we've got a long way to go yet, and we expect more of them in the hours to come.
All right, that's a picture from Ramallah. Charles Stratford reporting. Thanks, Charles. Well, all this comes as Israel's bombardment of Gaza continues, and earlier, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he made a statement. Let's go to Sarah Harrod, who's live for us in occupied East Jerusalem. Sarah, tell us what more we heard from Netanyahu.
Well, Nick, it was hailed as a prime-time major speech for the public. He hasn't done many of those since October the 7th. I think this may be his third. And, we're expecting maybe a big announcement. Of course, the imminent question everyone's asking is when is this ground invasion going to happen of boots on the ground, Israeli boots in Gaza? Well, we still don't have that answer. What he has said is that we are still preparing for it. So again, no indication of a timeline. He did say that they will make that decision through mutual consensus. Of course, he's referring to the war cabinet. He said, regardless of political decisions, this is something they will decide when it happens. He also said that they are continuously working on securing the release of those that are held captive, of course, in Gaza, which is a slightly different rhetoric to what we were hearing in the beginning when this Hamas attack happened. When people had asked them what their plan was, they said they were going to go in full force. They were going to destroy Hamas, its military wing, its political side, and that clearly has changed in what they're saying. That they say that they will go in and try and find out where these hostages are. But again, a lot of talk, but still no response as to when this is likely to happen. And he also did say, though, that there will be people that
raspberry,
acknowledge that they made mistakes.
apple, and grape.
But really, the first time there is a recognition from him as to the failure that happened by Israel when that attack happened.
Sarah, thanks very much. Sarah Harrod there in occupied East Jerusalem. The international charity Oxfam is warning that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. It says just 2% of the regular food supply has been delivered to Gaza since Israel imposed a total siege on the territory. Around 60 trucks containing food have been allowed into Gaza over the past few days. And that is compared
It's not enough, though. It should be 60 a day.
Before the war. Oxfam describes the situation as horrific. It says 2.3 million Palestinians have been collectively punished in contravention of international humanitarian law.
Nothing to do with it's nothing to do with international humanitarian law. It's called the Geneva Convention. Prisoners of war, which they are now. It can't be. Yeah.
Set up by the UN Relief and Works Agency in Khan Yunis.
I'm now digging for water.
Homes in the northern Gaza Strip to escape.
Digging water or digging graves?
Many have lost family members. Now they are facing starvation.
Yeah, they're not going to starve. Start slaughtering sheep. Start slaughtering the goats. Bullshit that they haven't got any food. We saw all the goats and the sheep the other day. Get milk from the goats so the kids can drink milk, and then someone slaughters a goat and they cook it over a spit.
We volunteered to prepare meals for the residents of this camp.
Like they do in the Philippines with the pigs.
Trucks carrying humanitarian aid are waiting at the Rafah border.
So it's nonsense, they haven't got any food.
But only a few dozen have been allowed to enter Gaza.
They've got plenty of food.
According to the UN,
they got all the goats. They've got goat's milk. They've got goats, so they can make cheese from the goat's milk.
Starvation is being used as a weapon.
And then the mothers can drink the milk, and then the babies and the young kids can suck mummy's boob and get milk. So it's horse manure that they haven't got food. You got loads of it. Is it here every time you go live on TV? You hear the cockerel. So they've got chicken. They've got soup book. And I'm pretty sure they can grow veg.
A number of kind individuals are donating some food supplies. We are cooking simple meals with ingredients we can get our hands on. We serve a total of 500 people a day. It gives us a sense of unity. The Palestinian Water Authority says Gaza's water production has fallen to a mere 5% of the average total because desalination plants need fuel to operate. Non-stop Israeli airstrikes have either damaged or completely destroyed bakeries.
If they've got no water, what are the fire brigade using to put out fires?
Al Jazeera. Well, let's hear now from Juliet Touma, who's the UN Relief and Works Agency's spokesperson, says that a lack of fuel will stop her organisation from functioning.
Lack of fuel. Right, they've got 60 trucks have gone into Gaza over the last 3 days. Each one of them trucks holds about 2,000 litres of petrol or diesel in their thing. They can siphon that out. So it's bull. Food, they've got goats and chickens, which they can slaughter. I'm pretty sure out of 2.5 million people, there's a butcher. Milk they can get from the goats. The fuel for the generators, they can get that from the lorries that are bringing the aid in. Just siphon the fuel out.
Because we are a neutral humanitarian organization. We are what we call direct implementers. We have 13,000 staff members on the ground. They take those supplies and they distribute them or use them for the benefit of the communities that we serve. We have a very...
So the fact that they haven't got fuel or food is bull.
How is humanitarian assistance used for the benefit of the people that we were mandated by the General Assembly of the United Nations to serve?
Hezbollah leaders have met senior officials from Palestinian groups, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, to discuss the war with Israel. The group has also been holding funerals for fighters killed in exchanges across the border between Israel and Lebanon. Elijah Magner is a military and political analyst covering the Middle East and North Africa, and he told Al Jazeera that Hezbollah's attacks are splitting Israeli military resources.
The mere fact that Hezbollah has attracted 3 out of 9 Israeli divisions, splitting the Israeli forces, not allowing the Israelis to concentrate only on Gaza, and threatening Israel about the possibility to engage on 100 kilometers border between Lebanon and Israel, is already an involvement. Now, Israel is not realizing, and it doesn't guess.
Lebanon's got a 100-kilometer border. That's about 75 miles. And they've got 500,000 men. Israel's got 500,000 men. They ain't going to cover a 75-mile border with that one.
Further escalation where Hezbollah can break the border. This is why the Israelis have created 2 lines of defense, taking very seriously the threat that's coming from Hezbollah and thinking that the Hezbollah special forces, who are several thousands, deploy along the borders, that they might break the borders and come in, particularly when Hezbollah blind the Israelis by destroying all the cameras and the radar. So how long Hezbollah can go? I don't think Hezbollah is going to go on an all-out war, because there is an idea trotting now that Israel is standing down on a general invasion of Gaza because it doesn't want to be further involved in going to a cemetery and a trap that is waiting inside the city.
Qatar and Turkey have condemned Israel's war on the Gaza Strip. Qatar's prime minister has called for a ceasefire as Israel's non-stop bombardment is taking a toll on Palestinian civilians living in Gaza. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, also says negotiations to release more than 200 Israeli captives held in Gaza is making progress. He spoke alongside Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, who's visiting Doha.
We have seen some progress in the past few days with the release of the first two Americans, and then the release of the two women two days ago, and with the mediation of Egypt as well. I think that if we compare where we started and where we are right now, there is some progress and some breakthrough, and we will remain hopeful. The negotiations.
What did I say? Raspberry, apple, and grape.
At any moment of time, I think that if we will be able to get along between the two parties, I think we will see some breakthroughs.
I made it
pretty soon
with frozen frozen fruit, sorry.
The ministers of foreign affairs of Turkey and Qatar called for an immediate end to the war in Gaza and to pave the way for humanitarian corridors, warning
I love his glasses.
Full-blown confrontation that could spill into the entire region will continue to be high as long as there is no immediate end to the conflict. And joining me to talk more about the meeting between the two ministers of foreign affairs is Mr. Majid Al-Ansari, who is the spokesperson of the Qatari Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I do understand this is going to be a sensitive issue for Qatar now because it's playing a key role in the hostage negotiations. But are we anywhere close to anything that could be conducive to a breakthrough when it comes to the hostage issue?
We remain, of course, optimistic about this process, which we started immediately as the escalation in this conflict has begun. Obviously, the difficulties on the ground, the logistical difficulties are always a hindrance in such mediation, but we remain, of course, optimistic that we will be able to accomplish more than this. And what we have seen with the release of, till now, more than 4 hostages is certainly a positive sign, which we hope we can build on.
Okay, going to bring you some news from the US now. And Mike Johnson, an ally of former US President Donald Trump, has been elected as the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. The Louisiana lawmaker is the 4th Republican nominee for the position since his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, was ousted. This ends weeks of infighting in the Republican Party. Heidi Jo Castro is on Capitol Hill and joins us with more on this. So take us through what's happened.
Well, Nick, even here on Congress, the focus is on the war in Israel and Gaza because the U.S. Congress had been champing at the bit now since the beginning of the war to take action in support of Israel, but it had been unable to due to the fact that there was no House Speaker in the U.S. for 22 days. Well, finally, that came to an end with the election of Mike Johnson, the close Trump ally, who is a social conservative Republican. And if you'll listen to what he told his supporters, even before taking the oath, he made it clear that Israel was top of his mind.
The first bill that I'm going to bring to this floor in just a little while will be in support of our dear friend Israel, and we're overdue in getting that done.
And that resolution has been debated, if you can call it that. Out of the 435 members of this chamber, there were 425 who sponsored this resolution, which makes clear the U.S. support for Israel. Nowhere in this resolution does it mention civilians in Gaza.
Why are people having such a job talking today?
Urged upon Israel's reaction to Hamas. And we heard members one after the other from both parties standing up to voice their strong support for Israel and what they called its defense against Hamas terrorists. The notable people who did bring up mention of civilians in Gaza included Nancy Pelosi, the former Democratic House Speaker, who said that innocent people, including children in Gaza, must be protected from these air raids and such. However, she, as well as an overwhelming number, supported the passage of this resolution, which came as no surprise, given all the public statements of support that members have been giving toward Israel. It's notable too, if you compare this resolution that just passed with a competing one, if you will, that was introduced by about a dozen very progressive Democrats, including the Palestinian American Rashida Tlaib, who represents Michigan, that had called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Well, no traction whatsoever, especially with this new Republican House Speaker, Mike Johnson, who has the power to decide which bills to bring to the floor and which not to. And as you heard him say earlier, his very first action was to bring to the floor this resolution that very unequivocally announces U.S. support for Israel and Israel alone in this conflict. I will say, though, that there is a growing amount of dissent among the American public who have staged protests in Washington and elsewhere in support of a ceasefire in Gaza. In fact, just across from where I'm standing today, there was a protest with about a dozen Jewish Americans who were arrested. They were calling for a ceasefire in front of the Senate office of the majority Senate leader. Again, they were arrested. But the widespread support here in Congress from both parties is very clearly
Heidi,
in Israel's favor.
thanks for that, Heidi. I'll be back in a couple of minutes with more.
A weekly look at the world's top business stories, from global markets to economies and small businesses.
Worsening food insecurity around the world. Is there something that the international community, in your view, should be doing?
To understand how it affects our daily lives. Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera.
Expo 2023, Doha. The world of fascination, where science meets nature. A world of joy, where millions will be entertained, and where you will savor every moment of the present while celebrating the future. Join us and let's discover a better world. Expo 2023, Doha.
State propaganda, media censorship, and the rise of authoritarian rule.
You wake up one day, the system has been turned from an electoral democracy into a competitive authoritarian regime.
A look at the lust for power in Hungary and Myanmar through the experiences of those who live it every day.
There is a pressure on us, but we have to be very careful, of course, and we have to be brave enough to support that pressure.
How democracy dies. Democracy Maybe on Al Jazeera.
Our coverage of Africa is what I'm most proud of. Every time I travel there, whether it's East or West Africa, people stop me and tell me how much they appreciate our coverage. And our focus is not just on their suffering, but also on the more uplifting and inspiring stories. People trust Al Jazeera to tell them what's happening in their communities in a clear and unbiased way. And as an African, I couldn't be more proud to be part of it all.
Hello, I'm Nick Clark. This is a News Hour live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, our colleague from Al Jazeera Arabic has learned that wife, son, daughter and grandson have been killed in an airstrike. The entire team here in Doha is offering our sincere condolences. And the strikes continue. This was near a hospital that's already out of action. We don't know yet how many are dead. Starvation being used as a weapon of war in Gaza. That's what Oxfam says, as it demands food to be allowed in. The diplomatic standoff continues.
This is bull. The kids are starving. So why doesn't the mother put the kids on her boob and they can drink her milk? Well, we haven't got any food. This is pure Hamas propaganda.
Out of Gaza, beginning by offering the condolences of the entire team here in Doha. My colleague from Al Jazeera Arabic, Wael
Well, if they haven't got any food,
as a result of the
if they haven't got any food, why did the hostages that have been released say they were given food, water, and medicine? So they've got food and water.
While he was working.
الذي حدث أصبح واضح هو مسلسل استهداف
What happened has become clear. It's the repeated targeting of children and civilians.
قد رصدت منطقة
We were talking about all the airstrikes, and I had covered Yarmouk area. And after returning
Now,
to this place,
why is that guy
all areas, including
being forced away from the camera? I bet because he's a mask. The guy in the black, is he not this one, but the one with the pips on his shoulder? Was that Hamas police?
Unfortunately, this is what happened.
Notice how certain people are being pushed out of the way.
We've been taking our power from you, these tears.
بالتأكيد يعني احنا
It's a great crime against women and children, a lot of them.
Well, let's speak now to Tarek Abu Azoum, who's in Khan Yunis in Gaza. And first up, Tarek, tell us what Wael is going through right now and what your connection to him was.
Well, yes, Nick, the Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip continues. Since the early hours of today's morning, the level of attacks and its even scales has been expanded to...
Now, I wonder if that guy was pushed out of the camera because he's supposed to be dead.
Al-Aqsa murders compound complex in the surrounding areas of the complex, which has been severely destroyed.
Right, his baby's supposed to be dead.
Were carried out in the eastern areas.
He wasn't dead, he was alive.
Claiming the lives of dozens of Palestinians and causing such dramatic destruction for every single aspect of the besieged territory. The eastern areas of the Gaza Strip.
Now, how did he get the bruise on his face?
At the beginning of this day, these kinds and the level of
There's a big bruise on his face there. How did he get that?
Preparing for a potentially
This is nonsense.
that might take place on the ground at any moment.
And this is something that you're going through every day. It's something that Wael is going through every day in his work, and for him, it's been met with tragedy today.
Well, yes, it was a very catastrophic day for every journalist inside Gaza Strip and every reporter after what happened with our Arabic Al Jazeera Arabic correspondent Wael Dahdouh.
Kids aren't dead at all.
His family was killed and attacked by the Israeli occupation forces. He lost his wife, his daughter, his son, and one of his grandchildren. What happened with Wael Dahdouh today, it had been experienced by every single Palestinian family inside the besieged territory. Wael had lost 4 members of his family. Other families inside the Gaza Strip had been completely wiped out from the civil registry. But what was really special about our colleague is that he bravely and with an outstanding character.
If his kids have been killed, how did he get them out of the hospital? Oh, to the hospital. Why was he in the house?
Crack down the sounds of truth on site the besieged territory. Wael has always delivered the truth to the international community and to the whole world about what is happening inside the Gaza Strip. He's doing and delivering.
Sorry, I don't believe it.
In order to shed the light on the recent updates on the ground in the Gaza Strip. As we know, Wael, we have a very strong and close relationship with him. He refuses to take any kind of even short rests in order to complete covering the events on the ground, as he is really accurate in delivering the truth to the whole community.
Well, that kid looks very alive to me.
Wael's family become the news. Wael family has become now the one of the victims that have been fallen due to the Israeli attack. It's really hard to believe and even to think that someone can lose his family. Wael today was very brave in dealing with this in order to keep.
Yeah, right. That could be more kids that were in the house. Wife. What was it supposed to be? Wife, grandson, and daughter. Oh, and son.
Let's hear now from Tamer Al-Mashal, who's an Al Jazeera presenter and former Gaza correspondent. He joined me earlier right here on set in our studio, and he's worked closely with Wael Duda.
It's a shocking moment, breaking heart, and sad. I know Wael for many years. Since my work in Gaza, we covered together the main events in Gaza. The main wars against Gaza in 2008, 2012, 2014. He's a brave man, professional, and he's a friend, by all meaning of a friendship. I'm really feeling very sad in this moment that Wael, who was covering the news to be a news, his family to be news to be covered, Wael now, he lost his wife, Amna, and he lost his son, Mahmoud, who is the one he was hoping, Wael and Mahmoud, to be a professional journalist in the future. He was training him to be a journalist, even covering with English. During this war, Mahmoud was doing some videos on social medias with English to the English audience. And Sham, the daughter of Wael, has been also killed in this shelling, and also his grandson Adam, as we received the latest that he lost him in this airstrike. Sundus, Khulud, Batul, also they have been injured. So it's really a very sad moment for a colleague.
Yeah, he's making it up. If you keep looking at this guy, he keeps looking down at his notes.
To be honest,
what am I going to say? How am I going to make this story up?
We're 24 hours in contact because, like I'm from Gaza, he's a friend, and we were following the news. And he insisted to be in Gaza and to maintain the coverage from Gaza, despite all the difficulties, despite all the targets. And
why is he bruised on his face?
One of the few journalists.
That's what I want to know.
Gaza and covered from Gaza. In the time that when the Israelis announced that the South and Middle Gaza, after the Gaza Valley, is safer, he moved his family, and the family sought for shelter in the middle camps in Iraq.
So supposedly to a safe area, right?
But in the end, this is the result.
Of course, this is the family of a journalist which has been killed, but additionally, at least 23 journalists have been killed since the start of the conflict. Sharif Mansour is the Committee to Protect Journalists in Middle East and North Africa Program Coordinator. He's based in Washington, D.C., and says that the number of journalists killed since the 7th of October is the worst he's seen.
This is the deadliest time we have on record for journalists dying, doing their work anywhere else since we started counting. We have not seen people in 2 weeks, period. Over the course of more than 20 years, documented 20 journalists overall, mostly Palestinian, 18 of them dying, covering this conflict, past wars and the Gaza wars. 13 of them were in Gaza. But we've already seen close to double that just in the last 2 weeks. And comparatively in Ukraine, we counted...
You'll probably find out after all this is over
so far.
That Israel have bombed all the tunnels in Gaza, and Hamas and the people are all living in the desert where the tunnels are.
At the United Nations, both American and Russian draft resolutions on the war on Gaza have been vetoed. Russia's ambassador to the UN also criticized the United States.
Exactly 1 week ago, the US blocked the second attempt by the Council to produce a response to the horrific crisis by vetoing the draft humanitarian resolution that was prepared by Brazil. And they were the only ones who voted against our proposed amendments with a call for a rapid humanitarian ceasefire and a condemnation of all arbitrary attacks on civilians.
Well, Kristen Salumi has been monitoring events at the United Nations in New York as they have been unfolding. And Kristen, bring us up to speed on what's been happening.
Yeah, so 2 votes today, 2 different draft resolutions. There have actually been 4 drafts, 4 attempts by the Security Council to comment, to make their voices heard on the situation in the Middle East. 6 meetings, still no resolution, still no unified position. We had the 2 drafts, one by the United States, one by Russia, and the main difference is this issue of ceasefires. The United States version called for humanitarian pauses, basically allowing aid to get into Gaza safely, but not calling for a full-blown ceasefire. Russia's version called for a full-blown ceasefire. The United States version had enough votes to pass. There were 10 votes in favor, although many council members said that they would have liked to have seen other things included in the draft. They said it was important to come together and that they supported it. But Russia and China voted against it, and they both have veto power, so they vetoed the resolution. The UAE also voted against it. Russia then submitted its own version. It also got 2 vetoes from the United States and the United Kingdom, and most of the other countries just abstained on it. Russia said that it was imperative that a resolution had called for an immediate ceasefire and accused the United States of not consulting enough. Actually, the United States accused Russia of not consulting with others. Russia said, we're just trying to put something together basic that everybody can agree on. And in fact, it's you, the United States, who didn't listen to comments that people were saying. So back and forth between the United States and Russia, yet again in the council, resulting in no action whatsoever.
No action whatsoever. But is there any hope that there will be a resolution at some point?
There's a lot of frustration, but there is still hope. I should point out that the United Arab Emirates, which also voted against the U.S. resolution, said that it was silent on the issue of forced evacuations and forced displacement of the Palestinians, and that UN agencies and humanitarians had also called for a ceasefire. France was interesting in their response. They said that unfettered humanitarian access is essential. We could have a pause that leads to a more permanent ceasefire, clearly trying to walk the line between these countries and get something done. In fact, we're told by a source that they had asked for a delay to try to get something together that could actually pass, sources tell us in the council, and they had a little bit of support for that, but the U.S. decided to go ahead and put this to a vote anyway. So to better answer your question, there is still some hope in the Security Council. Malta, speaking on behalf of the elected 10 members of the Security Council, said that they would now be putting together their own version and hope to reach a compromise.
All right, Kristen, thanks for that. Kristen Sluby there at the UN. Thank you. Now, US President Joe Biden said on Wednesday that although Israel must defend itself, there can be no return to the status quo in the future. Speaking on Wednesday at a press conference at the White House, Biden also called for aid to be allowed to reach the people of Gaza.
Israelis and Palestinians equally deserve to live side by side in safety, dignity, and...
You know, I can't believe how dumb people are.
As it stood on October the 6th.
Yeah, these are supposed to be leaders of a country, and they can't see that Hamas and Gaza are leading them down the garden path.
What comes next? And in our view, it has to be a two-state
I can't
solution.
believe how stupid they are.
Let's bring in Mike Hanna in Washington, D.C. Tell us more about what President Biden had to say, Mike.
Well, you heard there President Biden reaffirming his belief in a two-state solution. We also heard from him emphasizing that innocent Palestinians are involved in this ongoing conflict, that Hamas, says the president, are using civilians as human shields. This, says President Biden, places an added burden on Israel as it continues to deal with the crisis. President Biden also implied that he at no stage had asked Prime Minister Netanyahu not to conduct a land invasion of Gaza, saying that that was a decision that was up to the Prime Minister and the Israeli Security Cabinet. But President Biden also was harshly critical of settler violence in the West Bank, in which hundreds of Palestinians have been driven from their home by settlers in recent days, saying this, as he put it, was pouring oil on the ongoing fire.
Mike, this new House Speaker has hit the ground running. Tell us about his first act.
Well, indeed, yes. After weeks of division and argument, the Republicans have finally agreed on a House Speaker, Tom Johnson, the representative from Illinois. And the first thing he did, as promised by all the Republicans, is introduce a resolution supporting Israel in the House of Representatives, the first action of a House that is now able to conduct business. The resolution 771 is entitled Standing with Israel as it Defends Itself Against the Barbaric War Launched by Hamas and Other Terrorists. Now, this is a bipartisan motion. It received very clear bipartisan support, speaker after speaker expressing support for the motion, support for Israel. There is the vote which is ongoing at the moment. There are, however, at least 10 who have voted against. Now, because this is digital voting, we do not know exactly who and exactly why, but slightly surprising that this is not a unanimous vote, that there does appear to be some opposition to it for whatever reason, which is something that we'll find out in the hours ahead. But the very clear fact is that this motion is going to pass, this resolution, and it will pass on a strongly bipartisan basis.
All right, Mike, thanks for that. Mike Hanna reporting. Well, diplomatic efforts taking place right around the world, and European leaders are set to meet in Brussels to discuss the situation in Gaza. Steph Vasson, there's more.
Well, ahead of this summit here in Brussels, European leaders are really struggling to have a unified response on what's happening in Gaza and on how to respond to Israel's bombardments. There's a division among the 27 member states, with Germany, for example, and Italy against a kind of draft communique that they're trying to make about a humanitarian pause or a humanitarian window. A lot of leaders really are in favor of this as well, because they really think that now humanitarian aid is very urgent and should go into Gaza. But even on that issue, the 27 leaders can't agree, let alone talking about a condemnation or asking for a ceasefire. So what happened is, after the October 7th attack by Hamas, most EU leaders, and at the forefront, the president of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, said that Israel has every right to defend itself, full stop. There was no more addition to that, basically a carte blanche. And what happened is that there was a lot of response.
Well, if they think the generators are going to shut down, they need to talk to Hamas for fuel. Apparently, Hamas are holding 700,000 litres of fuel.
Also give humanitarian assistance. So there's a lot of pressure on these EU leaders to come up with a solution with some stronger wording. But at the moment, all we see is division. And we have to see what's going to happen in the next 2 days.
Oh my God, we just had an earthquake.
Can find some unified response.
The house is just shaken.
Step fast from Al Jazeera, Brussels.
Let's tie this all up with our political analyst, Marwan Bashari, joins us now from London. Marwan, first up, the killing of Wael Dahlou's family brings home the reality of what's going on in Gaza, but that reality doesn't seem to spin to the UN, where there's still no resolution for a ceasefire.
Exactly. And just a word on that. One of the things I've been thinking about throughout this evening is just how much influence does Wael have in the Middle East, in the Arab world. Like Shireen was, he is a nightly guest in every living room in the Arab world. So you can imagine that the tragedy, his family's tragedies, is now the tragedy in probably every other household in the Arab world. So I think that's probably something to bear in mind when we speak at the United Nations and those politicians who are trying not so hard to reach a resolution in order to reduce some of the suffering in Gaza, some of the killing, the bloodshed, the genocide that's going on there. But clearly, they're not very serious. They're more cynical than sincere. Clearly, they are trying to score points against one another, notably the United States and Russia that are basically keeping at each other. So they are making some points as to why they want a certain resolution the way they want it. But I think they're certainly not compromising in any which way that allows for a compromise to take place.
Despite the failures so far, there is some hope still that there will be a resolution, but you do wonder what heft that would have if it comes.
You know, Israel, there's a motto in Israel, the world can say what it wants and we do what we must. I'm not sure that Israel is going to be listening to anything that's coming out of the United Nations. It didn't do that for the past 75 years. Resolutions from the United Nations are collecting dust at the UN headquarters regarding Israel because Israel simply never abides by them. There are various Security Council resolutions, hundreds of UN General Assembly resolutions that Israel never abided by. And yet Israel has the chutzpah, the audacity to lecture the UN Secretary General when he says simply, this is not coming out of vacuum. It's like as if Israel has become the speech police of the United Nations. It is just incredulous to be listening to threats made by the Israeli ambassador to United Nations Secretary General, the man who represents...
I want to know what this glow is.
To be threatened that way.
Been watching it for a few days. It's like there's a dome over a certain part of Gaza. And I want to know what it is.
These resolutions would not have much weight because Israel is sheltered by the world superpower, by Washington. And we've been seeing that throughout the evening. And while President Biden speaks in theory about some resolution of sort, he continues to...
My question is, why do we have lights there, lights there, lights there, lights there, light there, light there, light there, all that light, all these lights, and then all the way along here is lights? Why? It's supposed to have no power, no fuel, no nothing.
So he is talking about that.
Well, that's interesting that he just started to talk about that after there was a huge story, investigation.
If this here is one apartment, why would they have three lights on? Like, you look here, that's another apartment, it's only got one light. Why has that one got three?
It's become public and quite a scandal that there is some talk. And just quickly, by the way, most of these youth-held settlers that are carrying the violence against Palestinians in the West Bank are either Americans or descendants of American citizens. So I think it's kind of something to pay attention to, that these cowboys think themselves are like they are in the Midwest and in the Wild West. And the question of Palestinian state, I just like to remind our viewers around the world that when Biden was last...
Gaza Media Office says many bakeries have been destroyed by bombing.
Forget about a resolution and a two-state solution. It's not the time. That's what he told the Palestinian president. This is not the time, forget it. So now if he talks about it...
At least 10 people were killed in the latest attack on a bakery.
Is he saying first that Hamas's action, its gruesome attack on Israel, is the reason why now America is talking about two-state solution? Does that mean that Hamas did the right thing by its gruesome attack so that the American president can now actually talk about the two-state solution? Or is he covering up for Israel? Basically saying Israel can go on and do its genocide, and we will discuss later, as we always discuss, the question of two-state solutions. It's not serious, Nick. Americans have not been serious about backing a real resolution of this issue. If they are, if the French are, if the British are, I have a simple suggestion. Commit today to recognizing the Palestinian state.
The British, we're kicking Israel's ass.
Marwan Bashar, political analyst, thank you.
We want an immediate cease and
So ahead
desist.
here in Al Jazeera, we got more coverage of the war on Gaza.
Hello, we've got some lovely warm sunshine across the southeast of Europe. That's the good news. Elsewhere, you can see it's a pretty messy picture. Lots of cloud and rain, lots of wet and windy weather tumbling in, but at least it is mild for the most part. Further north, this weather system here, this front, well, to the north of that, that's where it's cold. We've got high pressure in charge. The Scandinavian high, and we are seeing some wintry weather just tucking its way in. Still on the leading edge of our rain here. That is readily turning to snow. North of that, it is dry and crisp with sparkling sunshine coming through. But not much sunshine in also central areas. This is where we're seeing more of that wet and windy weather streaming in from the Atlantic. Some heavier bursts of rain through Spain and Portugal, just around the Alpine regions. A little bit of snow here as well, of course. That'll continue to drive its way further east with some heavier rain just coming in across northern parts of the Balkans, pushing across towards Austria, towards Hungary, towards that western side of Ukraine. Wet and windy weather will continue to sweep its way in across those western parts. More heavy rain coming through here. Down to the southeast, let's get back to our warm and sunny weather, which stretches across the northeast of Africa. Largely dry too now across northern parts, breezy there along the north coast. Showers continue across West Africa, mainly hugging southern parts of the coast.
Fake companies, fake passports, international banks, and the proceeds of organized crime.
Intanto ci spieghi chi è lei e qual è il suo lavoro, insomma, di cosa si occupa.
Con il film Pulp Fiction, io sono quello che in a remarkable three-part people and power investigation into a complex, secretive world, two journalists go in search of the Italian mafia's dirty money. The Launderer, Part 2, on Al Jazeera.
Getting close to the people most affected by those in power is often dangerous, but it's absolutely vital if the story is to be told.
Floods have subsided in this area.
We pushed as far forward as we can to the front line now. The smell of death is overpowering. A lot of the stories that we cover are highly complex, so it's very important that we make them as understandable as we can to as many people as possible, no matter how much they know about a given crisis or issue. As Al Jazeera correspondents, that's what we strive to do.
Hold on. Someone's just put Threads is putting our posts on Facebook. Oh, well, that's good.
You're watching Al Jazeera. Let's remind you of our top story. The wife, son, and daughter of Al Jazeera correspondent Wael Duggan has been killed in an Israeli airstrike in central Gaza. His grandson was also killed. The Duggan family used to live in Gaza City, but when the Israeli army issued an evacuation order, Wael sent them to Al-Nusrat refugee camp for their safety. He remained behind to report on the situation in northern Gaza. Wael was reporting from Gaza City on Wednesday evening when he was told that they had been hit. Wael's son Mahmoud was in his final year of high school, and his daughter Sham was just 7 years old. Al Jazeera has issued a statement about the tragedy. It says, the Al Jazeera media network extends its sincere condolences and sympathy to our colleague Wael al-Duggan on the loss of his family in an Israeli airstrike. Al Jazeera is deeply concerned about the safety and well-being of our colleagues in Gaza and hold the Israeli authorities responsible for their security. The network strongly condemns the indiscriminate targeting and killing of innocent civilians in Gaza, which has led to the loss of Wael al-Duggan's family and countless others. We urge the international community to intervene and put an end to these attacks on civilians, thereby safeguarding innocent lives. Well, Dana Boutiu is a Palestinian lawyer who has known Wael al-Duggan since 2006, and she told us about him and his work as a journalist in Gaza.
I don't think that people quite understand what life is like in the Gaza Strip. Foreign journalists are not allowed to enter into the Gaza Strip because Israel bars them. And so all of the images, all of the reporting that we see is coming from brave Palestinian journalists who are literally risking their lives in order to make sure that the world sees what is happening. And unlike foreign journalists who can come to a space, they have the ability to leave. At the end of the day, Palestinian journalists have to live in these spaces that have been so decimated by Israel. Wael is such a brave reporter, and every day, each and every Palestinian, we refer to him as being a mountain because he is unfaltering in his coverage. He continues, he persists in such beautiful classical Arabic as though nothing can bring him down. There are some people who always say, if you think you're having a hard day, imagine what it's like to be Wael Dahdour. This is before his family was killed. And it's because he continues to report with such eloquence, with such grace, to make sure that the world is actually seeing what Israel is doing. And beyond that, Wael isn't just an amazing reporter, but he's an amazing person. He is like so many of the other Palestinian journalists who've opened up their hearts, their homes, their spaces for so many foreigners. And to see the way that Israel is decimating this place, decimating the lives of people, flattening the Gaza Strip in their words, with the world remaining silent, is such a criminal activity. So it's criminal.
In the last hour, the Palestinian ambassador to the UN addressed the media in New York. He criticized the paralysis of the UN Security Council after draft resolutions from both the US and Russia were vetoed, saying he will table his own.
Security Council is paralyzed, and it is not shouldering its responsibility of calling for an immediate ceasefire to stop the carnage in the Gaza Strip. We are mobilizing the largest number of countries to co-sponsor our draft resolution. We'll begin the debate tomorrow morning in the General Assembly.
Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, say they have renewed attacks on Tel Aviv in Israel. Posting on Telegram, the group said it was in response to Israel's attacks against civilians. Footage emerged online on Wednesday evening, appearing to show the streets of Tel Aviv filled with dust and several buildings damaged. Let's bring in Charlie Stratford, who joins us now from Ramallah. Charlie, tell us more of what you know of what's happened.
Yeah, another indication from Hamas that they still have the ability to strike deep within Israel. We understand that the majority of the rockets that were fired were intercepted, but yes, at least one got through. We've been looking at the footage that you referred to there as well. Dusted streets, you can see a building has with a hole in it. We understand either residential or a business property. In terms of injuries, according to the Israeli media, figures vary, anything between 4 and 18 injured. So yeah, we're expecting news on that. As the hours go forward, we're also hearing reports of an attempt to strike even further north than Tel Aviv, around 100 kilometers north, the city of Tiberias. There was a missile that was intercepted there as well. Again, showing you that Hamas can still reach deep inside Israel. And again, the response from Hamas it was in response
if
to
Yemen had missiles that could reach,
attack to the south of Gaza, Eilat,
if
big tourist
Yemen had missiles that could reach Israel, then Hamas won't have a problem reaching northern Israel. But they have to be careful, because if they overshoot the border, they'll hit Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they'll take their mates out.
Very frightening scenes in Tel Aviv this evening.
Meanwhile, Charlie, Israeli forces have ramped up.
I don't know how big Israel is.
What's the latest?
I know Gaza is only 20 miles or 20 kilometers, but I don't know how big Israel is.
Thus far, since the October the 7th attacks, 1,350 Palestinians have been arrested from the occupied West Bank. At least 104 killed as well, including children and one woman. Interestingly, today, the top Israeli commander for the occupied West Bank, Brigadier General Avi Bluth, in a meeting with settler leaders here, he said that we have now taken our gloves off in our war with Hamas in Judea and Samaria. That's what Israel describes the occupied West Bank as being. And he went on to say, we are going to see more of these offensive operations to cleanse, in his words, terrorists' nests, like we saw being done in the camp of Nur Shams. Now, that's referring to a raid last week by the Israeli military on that camp. 14 people were killed in that raid, including 2 children aged 10 years old. And basically, there were areas of the camp that were completely destroyed by military-grade bulldozers, and a lot of people were arrested as well. So it seems as if we are a long way off seeing an end to this ongoing Israeli military campaign to basically arrest and detain as many suspected Palestinian gunmen or Hamas members in the occupied West Bank. And of course, that has huge implications for hundreds of thousands of civilians.
Even he's got a fat little look.
All right, Charles, thanks for that. Charles Stratford reporting there from Ramallah.
That's why he's got a fat lip, because he keeps biting his lip.
Gaza continues, and earlier the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a statement. Let's go to Sarah Hyatt, who's live for us in occupied East Jerusalem. And Sarah, tell us what more we heard from Netanyahu.
Well, Nick, since October the 7th, we've heard from Netanyahu twice, and this is the third time, and it was billed as a major prime time speech to the members of public, to the Israelis who've had lots of questions as to Israel's plan moving forward. It seems that he didn't really reveal much, as many thought he might. Certainly nothing in terms of a ground invasion. He still said the same thing we've been hearing for days, which is that we are preparing for a ground offensive. Now, he also highlighted that himself and the War Cabinet, which includes the Ministry of Defense, Yoav Gallant, as well as Benny Gantz, who is a former Minister of Defense, as well as the former opposition party leader, that they are working together. And of course, that probably comes off the back of a couple of days ago, where Israeli media had been reporting that there'd been a rift, that you had the military that wants to go forward, that's still waiting. You have thousands of reservists along that southern border just waiting. And then you have Netanyahu coming out saying that, no, there is no rift. We are actually working together. It does say in the statement that they will together decide on a consensus as to when they'll move forward. But I just want to also highlight a few of the other things that were said. He said that they're doing everything they possibly can to get the hostages back. Now, it seems, of course, in the background, even though Israel says it's not negotiating directly with Hamas, we know that for sure, but we've got countries like Qatar as well as Egypt, and working with the US have been mediating on that. Hamas has so far released only 4. Is it Hamas drip feeding them? We have to wait and see as to what happens next on that front. He also said things like, we're raining down hell on Hamas, which, it's maintained until now that it's only targeting Hamas. But what we're seeing on the ground, and of course what we've seen even with our correspondent's family, is that's not true. He warned within this statement for Gazans to move from the north.
Yeah, but he didn't. They didn't target the family.
Course,
they hit the refugee camp.
We know that the north of Gaza and the peripheries and central Gaza, all of it is being targeted. So there is no safe place for Gazans. He also talked about saving the nation, achieving victory. He said thousands of those terrorists, of course he's referring to Hamas, have been killed, he says, and that is only the beginning. So same rhetoric that we're hearing, which is what
I said this is fake, but then he's lost his wife, his daughter, his son, and his grandson, but then he's carried someone into the hospital. That could be another child, another grandchild, and that could be another son.
by Israel to stop this Hamas attack and not being able to preempt it. And we're still getting infiltrations that are happening from those in Gaza, from those infiltrators, the Hamas fighters that happened on Tuesday night. That is still ongoing, these infiltrations, even though there was a lull. The rockets, as you heard there from Charlie, are still coming over from Hamas. So it seems that perhaps, potentially, this statement is really to appease the members of public because there has been a lot of anger from the hostage families and as well as Israelis.
Right, guys, I'm ending for the night. I'll be back a couple of hours probably. I'll try and get a couple of hours sleep. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Really interesting statement. Whether we'll be getting any more from that anytime soon, it remains to be seen. But right now, no